Recently, I was invited to give a presentation on conifers at our community Spring Garden Expo. It's a two-day event where the vendors can share their products and educators can share their knowledge. Let's get right to it and take a look at a wide variety of conifers for northern gardens. All right. Thank you to NDSU Extension for having me on conifers. It used to be years ago, 70 years ago, if you wanted to plant a Colorado spruce, you were probably looking at a massive tree like this. This is in Bismarck. There wasn't selection choices, whether it be weeping, sprawling, globes. But now that there's breeding programs out there, there's an enormous amount of conifers to pick from as far as getting less size. So now we don't have to do this, which that's a project. That's in Bismarck. Somebody prunes those. So that's the great thing about different breeding programs, the different conifers. So Fat Albert, that's one that's about half the size of those monsters I just showed you. It's still out there in the nursery trade. That's not a great photo. It's got pretty good color, but boy, you start getting into some of the different pyramidal conifers. So if you've got a location where you just don't have that width, but you want that blue, this is an older variety. It's called the columnar Colorado spruce. A winter setting, and we'll mention that a few times as we go through this. There's so many conifers that you can use for winter interest, so many colors, and that's one of the beautiful things about evergreen conifers. Bonnie Blue, so this is one now that you're getting down to about a 20 to 25 foot width. So really nice for smaller yards. It's got a shorter needle and just a beautiful, beautiful blue on this. So that's gonna fit in there long term. Eventually I might have to take out a few of the perennials out of there as that tree expands. One step down further, Avatar. So now you're getting down into that 12 to 15 feet, but you still get that beautiful blue color, compact size. And then we're even gonna go a couple steps further. That's Avatar also. Dwarf Cesters. That guy stays around, is supposed to stay around 6 to 8 feet. And that one's probably gonna get 10 to 12, but that's never been touched with the pruners in 15 years. So just a really, really nice small conifer that fits in there beautifully. Not quite as bright blue. This is more of a bluish green. There's me next to a Hoops blue spruce. Hoopsy is the variety. Now this is a little bit more of a, you can see the habit in there, kind of bunchy, not real groomed like some of the other ones we looked at. And that was a characteristic that was introduced on that spruce. And I ended up planting this just like way too close to some other things. So I got proactive, and I usually don't do this. I'm always recommending plant your plants and then let them just develop naturally. Try to give them the space. But since I love plants, I overplant probably more than most people, where everything's too tight. But it kind of gives me content for YouTube videos for pruning. So anyway, I did prune this up just for fun. And at first I thought, I don't know, but I kind of like it. It was just something completely different, completely changes the character in there, didn't it? By opening up that trunk. So that's Hoops. Beautiful blue. You can see there. The cones, if you're ever wondering, you're looking at an evergreen, you go, I don't know what it is. The cones are probably the most descriptive part of it, the size of the cone. So if you can get cones and then match that up to the tree you're looking at, you have a much better chance of identifying what you're looking at. Now on the Hoops there, that's a red. As the cone starts opening up and developing, you get that beautiful red color. Just another great thing to enjoy on the conifers. And we're gonna look at quite a few more examples where you get pinks and reds on that new growth. And on that note, this is Spring Gold, is that where we're at? Yeah, Spring Gold. So this is a little Colorado spruce. Stays around 8 to 10 feet, but that new growth, you get that bright burst of that soft yellow. So it fits into a really small area, and you could keep this sheared if you wanted to as it got to a certain size, and you would still get that really nice early spring growth. And then after that spring growth is done, about, I would say 5, maybe 6 weeks, it'll just, what they call, harden off into that blue color there. Herman Now, this is a Colorado spruce also, stays more of a globose or short type look, but look at that. That's what it looks like in the spring. You get that burst of all the buds, or that bright reddish pink. So how cool is that? And now we're going to get into the globe spruce. This is one of the older varieties. When they first started doing breeding, there was just globe Colorado spruce. Well, they were listed as like a 4 to 5 foot mature. This is actually about 12 feet wide now. So it's completely blown out the average. And what happens with the older globe spruce varieties, they tend to revert to a pyramidal plant. So you can see here where it's starting to project up a little bit. About every other year, I have to keep pruning off those to keep it in that globe shape, or this will revert to just a pyramid Colorado spruce. But there are a lot of smaller ones. Yeah, there you can see the pruning has been done to keep it in that globe shape, but just an unbelievable just burst of blue in the landscape. There's one between, we're going to look at Arborvitaes towards the end. Those are most likely Holmstrup. We'll cover those briefly. But look at the nice contrast of conifers, that green, that blue. This is Montgomery spruce, and oftentimes Montgomery, if you go to a garden center, it'll look like it's a little globe spruce, but it'll immediately do that reversion to the pyramid. And I'm keeping this pruned now and sheared. I go in there about every third year, and I'll just take my manual head shears or automatic one, and I'm going to keep it that size long term. Eventually too, I'll start pointing out some of the other conifers that are mixed in here that we'll be talking about. That's a weeping Norway with that little bird bath under it. This was one Prairie Horizon. This was actually labeled as something that was going to stay globe or spreading. And I have an old photo, I couldn't find it, where it was a small little guy. Well, time goes on, you know how it is with our shrubs or trees. They just take off, and before you know it, they're too big. Well, this reverted into a pyramid, so I'm also keeping this pruned at that size, and I'm just going to keep it super tight. And the more you prune it, the more you're going to get that tight shape. And then we get into some of the newer globe varieties. This is St. Mary's broom. You're probably never going to have to worry about this reverting to a pyramid. So there are other really, really nice selections out there of that compact shape, way smaller than that first globe I showed you. This is Roundabout. This is one of the green Colorado spruce varieties, which most of the breeding goes into the blue, as you've noticed. So isn't it interesting that North Dakota, we're only in the Colorado spruce yet, how many different varieties that you can pick from that are available. It's wild. And then you can also find the globe spruce and many different ones we'll look at that are trained on a tree form. They call this on standard, is the nomenclature in the nursery trade. This is one in Bismarck up on Promontory Point, an older one. This is kept sheared every year. I actually do the pruning. And then we'll look at some weeping spruce here in just a little bit. You can see how they left that one going over the door. You get some different wild reactions from people. People love them or hate them, it seems like, on the weeping spruce. And so this is the Blues weeping spruce. And that shelf right here, this is probably 8 to 10 feet out. And then it just took off. And the interesting thing about some of the weeping conifers is they develop and become their own personality, like all of us. And they change as they grow. And that's one of the fun things about it. You start collecting conifers and you just kind of get addicted to them. This is one that my wife's in our landscape, and that shelf there, that's about 9 feet. And mine is starting to, around that yellow ribbon arborvitae, it's starting to curl around it. So now I got to decide, do I want to let it do kind of an S hook around it? So it's just kind of fun to watch him do that. And there again, there's that one up a Promontory Point. This is, I did some work for a guy in Bismarck, and he laughed. He goes, look at that. And I thought it was great, but I think he gets the opposite reaction. But yeah, he put him in. I don't know if he knew they were going to do that, but he leaves them, and it's kind of fun. Pendula glauca. This is one that stays a little bit lower to the ground, but you get that weeping habit. And look at how it looks in a setting like that. Isn't that something? And with the weeping conifers, a lot of them, they're trained at the nursery to certain heights. As soon as you remove that support, that's when they'll start doing the weeping. So you might buy a weeping conifer that's on a stick. You get it home, if you take that off, that new terminal, now it's going to take off and start doing that weeping. So just keep that in mind. And that's probably what happened here. This could have been trained up around that 6 foot, 8 foot. When I used to live in the Twin Cities, before I ever started doing YouTube and taking photos and cataloging plants, I remember coming across a weeping one that was probably 25 feet tall in this Minneapolis backyard. And it was just the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, but I don't have a photo of it. Winter interest, again, doesn't that just stand out? And you can see the conifer blue spruce in the background. That's that Montgomery that we looked at, and a weeping Norway. And now we'll start talking about the Norway spruce. So we're out of the Colorados. The Norway spruce, there's Norway spruce around Bismarck area, not a lot. Mostly I'm going to say it's probably the Norway spruce are into these interesting varieties like the weeping. I've had needle casts on this, a little shedding. I think it's because of sprinkler head is hitting it, and it's just getting too much moisture. Conifers are going to appreciate more of a dry, at least on the foliage. Here's a Norway weeping, same variety, but look at how much more thick it is. That one doesn't get any water on the foliage. Again, winter interest on these. Pay attention, look to the backdrop. If you're out in your landscape, eventually we're going to talk about, this is a dwarf Scotch pine that's been pruned into those little balls, kind of that oriental garden type look. Here's a weeping Norway. This is at the Absaraka research farm, and that was allowed to weep at a much shorter level, only about 3 feet tall. So if you're after that carpet look, that's just how they trained it out that way. Okay, the red cone Norway spruce. Now this one's got kind of an interesting habit too, with that a little bit irregular. I love it. This is in Bismarck also, over by the Sleepy Hollow, beautiful backyard. They've got some amazing things back there. That's a view looking down from it. And then this is a smaller one that my wife and I have, but that's the red cones on it. And I've never been over to that yard in the spring when that one's all burst out with the red cone, but I bet it's quite the show. And a close-up of those red cones as they come out. Gold drift, Norway spruce. We tried one of these. It died out the first winter, and I didn't try another one. But there are gold varieties of the spruce if you want that spring gold color. And then this kind of just fades out into a kind of a lightish greenish yellow. Upright Norway spruce, same as the Colorados. This is sold in, I've seen it in many different nurseries in Bismarck in the spring typically, but it's just, again, a very narrow upright spruce, different variety, short needled, softer than Colorado. This is I don't have a picture of it, but this is a Norway spruce that's upright, but it gets a yellow color. In the spring, for about 4 to 6 weeks, this will be bright yellow. And that contrast just stands out in the landscape. I think though, if you're gonna get a yellow conifer, you like that look. This isn't a spruce, it's a Taylor's Sunburst lodgepole pine. And this lasts about 6 weeks, that yellow color. So it candles out, you get that bright yellow color, and it's just really amazing to watch them in the landscape. Here's a close-up of it. The cones, again, I'm always attracted and interested in the different cones. All the different pines, the different spruce are going to have a different size cone, different characteristics. So once you kind of get, again, it's a practice, a hobby, you start like looking for it. You're looking for the cones on the ground because you want to see, okay, how does that cone look after it's been there a year? There's a Taylor Sunburst up at Promontory Point that I put in for a customer. So you can buy them small too. That large one, I think we put this in, it was a pretty good size one. You can spend sometimes for specimen plants like this, $400 or $500 is not uncommon. This is out of North Dakota State University, Royal Splendor Norway spruce. So this is, again, is a nice, compact, rich green color. And when we planted this, it actually burned up the first winter. It was a really bad winter for evergreens. I lost quite a few. And I thought, I can't believe it. It's a hardy Zone 3, North Dakota grown. But now it has come back quite nicely, and it looks pretty good. And I'll just mention too, again, look at the different various conifers in here. I didn't put it in this video. This is Troutman, has done very well for me in the area. And off to the left, that's a Tannenbaum Mugo pine. We're going to look at that one as well. Into the white spruce, the Black Hills spruce, the Black Hills white spruce. Now, if you're going to plant one spruce in North Dakota, this would be the top one that I would recommend. Colorados are getting hammered out east with fungal problems. They're starting to have massive needle shed, so they're really not even selling the Colorado spruce in the more humid regions anymore. So Black Hills white spruce, basically no problems that I'm aware of, none. And this was selected out of the Black Hills, incredibly hardy, tolerant to just all different soil types. And this was actually the history on this one. Burgeon's Greenhouses, if you're familiar with Detroit Lakes, they bought a nursery in Park Rapids, 120 acres. They had 70,000 of these spruce that were in containers, and they were just ragged because they'd been in the containers like way too long, like I think some of them 5 to 7 years. Well, I bought this for 15 bucks, that plant perfect when I worked there, and just threw it in the ground, and look at it, it's just absolutely beautiful. Again, the cones, much smaller on the Black Hills spruce. And then the weeping white. You'll see a lot of these around Bismarck. Once you kind of see one, you'll spot them. And most of the time they're straight up, but you can get a lot of it like irregular patterns on them too. And so they'll vary just a little bit, but just a great spruce that's hardy for tight areas where you want a pyramidal accent. We had one, this is an arbor, a metal arbor that I like using the rusty metal as a contrast next to a lot of the different plants. There's something about the brown next to yellow, and you'll see some of those. But this one actually died on us. It just went in decline over a 4 to 5 year period, and it just kept losing all its needles. It would candle out, and I finally just cut it out of there. But the weeping white, they'll have kind of a bluish green when they leaf out or candle out in the spring, and then they'll fade into just kind of a green. But if you like the blue, like that Colorado blue, the Engelmann spruce is worth a try. I've only spotted one in Bismarck, mine died, but that's kind of got a unique, real graceful habit, doesn't it? So the Engelmann blue spruce is one if you want the blue rather than that more green on the weeping white. Big Berta. I like some of the names you come across. We're going to come across another one pretty soon, Big Tuna. This is Big Berta. This was supposed to replace the dwarf Alberta spruce. If anybody's familiar with that, they always get brown in the spring, but then they candle back out. Our Department of Agriculture lists them as not hardy for North Dakota. I say they're hardy, but they're going to burn every winter. So Big Berta was supposed to be the replacement. This is actually at Plant Perfect now, planted for 7 years, and that's ours. So first year ours burned up, and it leafed out or candled out, looked pretty good, and then the next year it burned up again. So I transplanted it back to an area where you really didn't notice it, and then all the lower branches died. So I thought, why not? I just kind of turned it into a Dr. Seuss type thing where I just pruned up all the lower branches, and I don't know, I kind of like it now. It's kind of in the perfect setting, I think. So the white spruce, a much shorter needled variety. You can find globes in the white spruce. You can find small trees. This has been pruned and manipulated for years, trying to keep it in that shape. That's actually kind of a goofy little juniper there. And I think we've all seen some pretty wild pruning projects when we have to start pruning, at least I have. Okay, Mugo pine. Mugo pines are again, they're one of the toughest plants you can plant for North Dakota. Most of them are zone 2, and you can get a lot of different smaller tree forms, shrub form, trained on those little patio trees. So the Mugo pine, this is the Pumilio variety, and this was planted about 15 years ago. I actually planted it, and this is how we keep ours though. This was also planted about probably 12 to 14 years ago, and every year when those candles elongate and come out, it takes me about less than 5 minutes, and I just prune those candles. And I've kept this in a pin cushion for that long. So it's an amazing difference between the same exact variety, planted the same size, if you want to manipulate them. This is probably a Pumilio variety also, and this customer, she didn't like how it was coming over on the sidewalk, and since I like to experiment and they're going to pay me to experiment, why not? She said, can you just lift up those lower needles? And I thought, yeah, let's see what it looks like. So I never heard a complaint on it, but it's kind of interesting, and it kind of grows on you. You know, it's a different taste for different people. Maggie in here? Maggie Bell, she's a gal from Bismarck, and she actually had a fire come through her front yard. The cottonwood seeds started on fire at her neighbors, and it swept through their front yard. And these were Mugo shrub pines, and it burned up all those lower branches. Well, instead of pulling them out, she had them just all pruned up and created something really, I think, fascinating. This is a really nice look on the Mugo pine. So she didn't give up, so you can certainly do those type of things with conifers as well. There's a Mugo pine. This is a winery out by Borgelac, North Dakota. I think it's recently sold. What's the name of that one again? Dakota Sun. They have some really nice display gardens out there. I don't think they're public, but I took that picture there. Here we get into a yellow Mugo pine. Now this is opposite of the spring yellow that we were looking at on that Taylor sunburst, the Norways. This actually picks up that color in the fall. Like September, October, it starts turning yellow. And then you can see all winter long, you get that yellow. So winter sun, Mugo pine, just a great plant, one of my favorites. Super bright. And then what happens as we get into summer? It just reverts back to that green that you see there. Here again, just a little bit we're going to talk about. There's a larch in the back there, a Horstman's recurva with the distorted branching, and we've got the backdrop of the Colorado spruce. Here's that Tannenbaum that I briefly mentioned. It's a really, really nice upright Mugo pine. I will mention that a lot of the Mugo pines in our area now, they do get scale It's kind of a white substance on the needles. And it doesn't typically kill the Mugo pines, but as it progresses, you can start getting some needle casts. So something to keep in mind that you might have to eventually treat Mugo pines. This is Highland Splendor. Can somebody, Highland Splendor? This is a North Dakota State introduction, North Dakota State University. They introduced a very similar plant like the Tannenbaum, except they claim this grows faster and has a little bit tighter shape than Tannenbaum. You'll find Tannenbaum more frequently because in the nursery trade, big nursery growers, if they find something that sells, yeah, they're pretty much gonna, that's their girl, you know, they're just gonna go, go, go. But there are nurseries out there like Isley, and I didn't put it on the brochure, I should have, but if you really like conifers and really want to see different varieties and photos, it's ISELI, Isley Nursery, great website. You can type in spruce and it'll just bring up just hundreds of different varieties of different unique conifers. A lot of them we can't grow. The reason being we can't grow a lot of the more unique conifers is we don't have acidic soil. So if you start getting into some of the different pines, hemlock, amazing Campsiparis is a cypress, we don't have the soils that'll support them. But you know what, so far, you know, we've got a lot to choose from, right? Okay, here's big tuna. And when I planted this, I kind of go at it with a fury, or I did. And I thought this was going to be a little globe Mugo pine. Well, it turns out big tuna can get like 25 feet tall. And it's planted under a hawthorn tree. So I started pruning it, and I was just going to keep it small. Well, this winter the rabbits came in, they ate half the tree. So now it's going to look like that Mugo pine I showed you with a bunch of stems under it. And I don't like the look at all. I've got a little tree under a tree, so I'll probably dig it out. But that's what happened this winter. Bristlecone pine is an incredibly slow grower. When I worked at Plant Perfect, if we brought something like this in, that size, in 7 years ago money, that would have been about $800. Because they grow so slow, they're at the nursery, the growing ranges, for 10, 15 years before they finally get into a marketing size, and so they got to charge quite a bit for them. Okay, there's Sherwood Compact bristlecone pine. We've got one of them growing in our front area. Again, this was planted at about half that size 15 years ago, and so it's only doubled in size. Very, very compact, but a nice plant. The bristlecone pines, by the way, a little history, I think they're considered the oldest living tree on Earth. They found one that they think is over 5,000 years old up in the mountains somewhere. So bristlecone pine, the species itself has some old heritage. And there again, you can start looking at some of the different characteristics as that starts opening up, breaking dormancy in the spring. Again, the cones, very interesting with that purple. Arborvitaes. Arborvitaes are one of my favorite plants. They're within the Thuya genus. This is Technido, probably my favorite Arborvitae. These were planted little number 5 pot, about 2 feet tall. I didn't think they would ever grow together. You know how that goes, right? But the Technido, these have never been touched in 12 to 15 years. And I just love how they blend together. You get that contrast off that metal you see there. At the very end, if I have time, we'll talk a little bit too about we grow some of the conifers that you can't grow in our soils. We just put them in containers, you know, just for a variation to add some different, like a unique look in your landscape. Another view of the Technido. You can see it there going down that little pathway. And then Techni. Techni arborvitae's been around forever. And that's where Technido came from. It's an offshoot of the Techni. But Techni can get about 25 feet tall, 15 feet wide, a much looser habit. Technis are everywhere around Bismarck, but they're probably mostly pruned into various shapes, quite honestly, because they get planted too close, not enough room, and then the head shears come out, and you get these different looks. But they're really, really, really hardy. They don't burn. They don't tend to have a problem with snow load. Holmstrup. This is one of my favorite arborvitaes. So I love leaving these alone and not touching them. You get that little bunchy habit in it, very characteristic of the Holmstrup. Incredibly hardy also. This one, unfortunately, though, it does fold over in snow pretty bad, and I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. DeGroots Spire. This one gets about 20 feet tall, maybe, some of the bigger ones, the older ones. I like the characteristic, I call it forking, that habit on it, and they are very rigid. I've never seen the snow take this one down, but DeGroots is very hardy for our area. So if you need a nice pyramidal arborvitae, DeGroots is a great way to go. And there's a picture of that DeGroots. In just a little bit, we're going to look at junipers You can see icy blue, that's that dwarf cesters, Colorado spruce we looked at, so you kind of get an idea where these are planted in those settings. And I came across this in Bismarck too, up in North Bismarck, and I thought this was an interesting look. I think these might be that big tuna that I talked about, that were trained on a standard, and then they're probably keeping them sheared, and the degroots. And this fellow called me, and he wanted me to come in and start pruning, and I thought, ain't nothing to prune here, man. This stuff looks great. And so I talked him out of pruning, and I didn't have to work that day, so that was just a win. More yellow. I like using yellow around the landscape. It just draws your eye, and you get that. I mean, I don't like overpowering it and having it everywhere, but here and there. But look at how that stands out there. That's all year long, the yellow ribbon Arborvitae. You can also probably find another one that's hardy, sun-kissed Arborvitae. I didn't have a picture or put it on there, but this is our favorite Arborvitae for sure. Kind of gives you an idea. This was taken back in, I guess, 2022. How tall it is. It's probably pushing about 10 feet now, and it's growing slow. It's in a very, very dry area. This is up against those massive Colorado spruce. And Colorado spruce, a lot of people think that it's acidic. Nothing will grow there. It's not acidic. It's competition. Those roots are taking every drop of water and nutrients. So this one has slowed down in growth, which is a good thing because it's very dry there. Amber gold. This is a much smaller yellow variety, and it's been hardy here. I didn't think it was going to be. I lost a few branches on this one last year. Was able to prune them out of there, and it's looking okay. Had another amber gold in another location that's next to that Hoops spruce that we pruned up those branches. You can see it contrast with that purple salvia there. So just a nice, I think that's what I love the most about them. They can offer such a color contrast. Fire Chief Arborvitae, we planted one of these many, many years ago, and it didn't survive. I think it made it 2 or 3 years. So I would say this is a zone 5 plant. But if you're down in Bismarck and you've got protection, buildings, trees, you can grow a lot of zone 5 stuff, or at least try it. And Fire Chief is a neat one because it's got the new growth has this red tip, and I suppose where it gets the name Fire Chief is it's got that red mixed with the yellow. And thankfully they're not touching this with the pruners, and you get its natural bunchy kind of wavy habit. That's at the University of Minnesota Arboretum. Now we're going to quick look at several of the globe Arborvitaes. And the globe Arborvitaes, you can pick your size. You can have a 2 foot, a 3 foot, a 4 foot, a 5 foot. And that's really what a person should try to do if you're going to plant one, rather than planting one that's going to get massive and then try to prune it. Just pick the smaller one. So Danica is a really nice little small variety. Hetz midget is probably the most common Arborvitae out there for globes, and it's a beautiful one, about 2 to 3 feet tall. You'll never have to touch it. This is pygmy globe. Here you're getting up into about a 3 to 4 foot height naturally, rather than a 2 to 3 foot. Again, you'd never be able to tell these apart if you didn't have a label or a history or a record of it. Little giant. This one now gets up into the 4 feet. I don't know if these are little giant, but I think about what they look like. I just spotted these on a walk somewhere, I think in Minnesota. And then the older varieties, kind of like when we talked about that large, massive spruce in the beginning, this used to be what you had when you planted a globe Arborvitae. And this is probably Woodward, and they used to get, they're 10, 12 feet. They're just massive Arborvitaes, but you don't usually find these in the nursery trade anymore. Everything has really gone to smaller, more compact over the years that I've been doing this. Quebec weeping cedar. And I didn't know what this one was until one of the reps from that Isley nursery I mentioned. I invited him out to my landscape to kind of just look around and see what we had growing. And he identified this for me. And sure enough, I looked it up on the internet, and it matches almost perfectly. But Quebec weeping cedar, I think it's hardy to zone 3, very hard to find at different nurseries for whatever reason. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful plant with that soft weeping habit. And now we're talking about, here we go, a globe Arborvitae that at least they're not letting it get bigger. They had me come in and prune this for them. And, it fits, but it might have been better to have like a Hetz midget. This is actually Techni Arborvitae, that bigger one that I said can get 25 feet. So if you start when they're younger and you don't wait till they're overblown, oversized, and you start pruning them at a lower level, this could be kept like that for basically forever if you just pruned it every year. This customer actually, about a week after I pruned it, they ripped it out. They were trying to be able to see, if you were standing in this little area, it's a outdoor kitchen, fireplace area, beautiful. But if you're sitting down, it blocks your vision. And if you were to see what's out there, you know, you might have taken it down too, because it's just unbelievable what they've got growing. So the homeowner, he said, no, I'm done with it. He didn't want to have his view blocked anymore, so I found out he took them out. Look at that. That's a case of beer, a weekend project there, isn't it? Look at that. I think that's in Bismarck, but they're pruning those every year. It's like, whoa. And there's that Holmstrup I was talking about. Holmstrup's a beautiful arborvitae, but this thing has been brought down over the last 10 or 15 years like 3 times. And every year, this thing, believe it or not, it was looked like that. 2 days later, they have reaction wood, and it basically stood up on its own in like a 2 to 3 day period. And I only had to just tie a little bit of it. It was really incredible. Unfortunately, too, arborvitaes, not only with some snow problems, voles, rabbits, deer, they all like the arborvitae. So if you live in an area like next to native grass and you deal with voles, arborvitae, you know, you might have problems. We'll get into the junipers. Okay, junipers probably has the biggest variety selection as far as sizes, shapes, colors. You can have sprawlers that are 2 inches tall. You can have trees that are 50 feet tall. You've got golds, blues, across the board. So the juniper is actually a really, really good group to plant. And this was actually Motherlode is the name on that one. There is a picture of that one that's more developed with the color, but a beautiful golden color all season long. I'm allowed to kind of mingle with the pathway a little bit onto the sidewalk there. Prince of Wales, probably, in my opinion, if you're looking for a short one with a good green color, just a beautiful green. And this one actually, we'll look at an example in a little bit. It picks up a kind of a coppery orange winter color, which is a nice variation. But one of the things I like to do if I plant junipers and you've got rock or walls, try not to let that juniper cover it up, because, I mean, just wouldn't that be a completely different thing if it was just a juniper? So I have to prune pretty much every year now to keep those boulders exposed. This is the same juniper, looking at it from the back angle, looking out. I'm not sure what variety this is. It could be buffalo, but I thought that was just really nicely done, how they planted that and allowed it just to kind of blend with that boulder collections there, especially with that pinkish granite. And here's kind of that winter color I was talking about with Prince of Wales. This is in North Bismarck, and you can see the juniper just grew. And this has got to be a boulder wall under there, the whole thing. But if they would have taken the time or known, just keep areas where they could have cut out, and then back even into the center, I personally would have kept it, or even just had an opening in there where maybe there was some rock and you allow that juniper to go up. So there's a lot of different things you can do with creeping junipers to create different contours and different effects. Icy blue is a bluish variety. Blue chip used to be kind of the standard, and I think icy blue is just way better. It's a really flat one, beautiful color year round, and I'm allowing it to kind of move through this different rock here. The voles in our yard one year, I thought we lost this thing. They just devoured it, and I actually turned it into something pretty nice. I did do a video on that one where I took one of the longer branches and I put a boulder under it and I arched it up over, and now that'll create reaction wood, and eventually a guy could take that boulder out if he wanted to, and you would just have this branch kind of arching up. So icy blue, again, that one was just allowed to spread out to the edging there. And this one, for whatever reason, it winter killed out one year. Came out in the spring and it was just solid brown. So there, that's using the icy blue mixed in with the perennials. And what's happened in this bed, unfortunately, I'll quick mention though too, that the degroots are off to the left. The dwarf cesters, we're going to talk about a weeping larch in a minute. But the icy blue now has it's become so dominant, those perennials really aren't in there anymore. It just choked them out. That's the downside to some of the junipers like that. You really have to be aggressive to keep them in their territory. And especially if they're on wood or on wood chips or soil, they'll self-layer in and they'll root, and it just becomes almost uncontrollable. If they're on rock, they won't tend to root in, so it's a little bit easier to keep them pruned because the root system won't have anything to root into. But this is on wood chips, and that's probably like over 20 feet by 15 feet now that it's taken over. So I'm going to do something with it. I just haven't decided what yet. Jap garden, kind of a spiny, it gets the name Japanese garden juniper, very oriental, and this can be trained in various little trees, arching up over rocks, a slow grower. It's a very unique characteristic juniper, Jap garden. Anybody remember Marcy Flieger? This was her favorite juniper, Calgary carpet. I always had to, when I ordered for Plant Perfect, I had to keep Calgary carpet in stock because Marcy loved to use them on every job. So I like to keep, you know, your memories are part of plants too. They become, I guess, remembrances, just like music. Plants remind you of certain people, certain things. And so I'm glad that we've got a few Calgary carpets. And I've allowed this to, you can let it just be, if it was on its own, it would just grow out in kind of a circle. But I kept it pruned and allowed certain veins to kind of curve around and just to create a different effect with it. Taylor juniper, if you're looking for that upright look. So Taylor juniper, I love it. I love the upright look like that. It's the most narrow one that we can grow in our area. Another setting there of how it looks. And it picks up a winter color, similar to the Prince of Wales. Kind of gets that muted green, coppery, sometimes a plum type color. So they've changed throughout the season. Medora juniper, though, that's probably the most common juniper in our area for sure. And selected out of Medora, hardy, you know, probably zone 2, maybe zone 3. But the Medoras, eventually, they can get some size to them. You can get around, you know, the 8 to 10 foot widths. Wichita blue, another upright juniper with the name Wichita blue. It's a really, really striking blue color, but you can tell just how much more loose and open that is. And I'm probably going to have to start pruning this one, shearing it, and it'll end up looking a little bit more formal in there, but it's planted pretty tight in that area. Blue Arrow, I haven't been real impressed with Blue Arrow. I actually moved this one out of the location, so I transplanted it back here. It seems to be pretty tough, and I think it's going to stay pretty narrow. But so far, you know, sometimes you just got to wait for a plant to develop. The weeping juniper is something that I don't have. I forget the name of this one, Tollison's, I think, blue weepy Rocky Mountain cedar. This is spotted at the University of Minnesota Arboretum. And when you see them, if you like conifers, they really, really are dramatic in their nature, the weeping junipers. Not very common. I don't know why. I think they're just a beautiful plant. And again, just showing you, I believe this is at the Capitol in Bismarck, how they're using as an accent wall. This is probably Medoras. Medoras can vary a little bit. Sometimes they'll widen out. Other times they'll stay real narrow. This is a juniper in Bismarck that the lower branches, somebody pruned it up. I thought they created something pretty nice out of this. This is a weeping larch, and you can find some really nice weeping larch. I actually had to prune out a lot of the dead growth that built up over time, and I just created I left one of the lower branches, the only one that didn't have death in it, and I put a little rock under it. So now it kind of looks like it fits. So that was just kind of a fun experiment. Horseman's recurva, that's the one that's got that distorted, contorted branching, so a very unique look. Again, the cones on the larch. The larch are deciduous evergreens. They drop their needles in the fall. They do have a beautiful yellow fall color. This is varied directions. That's probably 25 feet wide. That's Absaraka also, the North Dakota State University Research Arboretum. Upright larch is the common larch, but there's the yellow fall color that you can get with the larch. We can't grow these. False cypress. Actually, this one was spotted in Mandan at one of the garden tours. I couldn't believe it. I walked up to it. I was like, oh my gosh, they got a false cypress growing. But the yellow ones, these are University of Minnesota Arboretum. This is just an amazing area. I can grow some little shrub ones that the snow tends to cover, and they do okay, but anything that's above snow line, it hasn't been hardy. But isn't that a nice look? So many different conifers growing in there, blending together. That's probably a fir tree. We can't grow firs either. There's a false fir called Douglas fir that can do okay, but you rarely see it in the nursery trade. And again, just some photos that are showing you some general areas, conifers, deciduous plants, the different color ranges, that icy blue, the bristlecone pine, weeping white, Arborvitae, and how much they just, I guess, just coordinate and work together. I'm about there for time? Yeah, and then just a few containers, and then we have time for a little bit of questions? Okay, so some of the containers, this is actually a Russian cypress. I believe it is hardy in North Dakota. You could plant it out. It's a little tree form. I've kept it in the nursery container now, I think close to 7 years. And I just overwinter it artificially. I throw it under a tarp in the winter to protect the root system. And it's still doing pretty good. This is I can't remember the name for sure. It's a Japanese something pine. But isn't that a cool look there too? So you can do some different interesting variations. And you can usually get 5, 7, maybe 10 years out of some of these conifers before they start showing stress. A juniper that I've kept pruned in that spiral shape takes me 5 minutes to prune the new growth every year. And I just move that in and out of that location, and I lay it down under a tarp also. And then you move that into there, and it just creates a whole different look for you. Unfortunately, we did not have a microphone available for the audience in the Q&A session. So that brings us to a close for this video. Time to get out there and plant some conifers. Thanks for stopping by Garden Hike. We'll see you again next video.